We're holding today the sign called Cancer, Sartan in Hebrew. For those of you who have been following from the very beginning, the very first lecture on astrology consisted of the various elements. Elements meaning earth, water, air, and fire. Every individual, every human being consists of all four, but there's always a dominant element. And there are 3 signs in every one of those elements, right? We have 12 signs, 3 signs per element. And we've covered till now an example of the fire with Aries. We've covered an example of earth with Taurus. And we've covered an example with air with Gemini. Tonight we're going to cover an example of water, the water element, and the first one is Cancer. But before we begin with Cancer, just want to cover a little bit, perhaps do a little overview of what all of this means. For those of you who were not here before, it's important to remember that the month is not the only factor that contributes to molding one's individuality and personality. The hour is also important. And a lot of what you will hear tonight concerning Cancer, whether it's about yourself or somebody that you know, may not match up 100%. But I assure you that it most likely will match up between 75 to 85%. The vast majority of what I will describe defines the typical Cancer, meaning that the water element is the most dominant in his chart, meaning not only Cancer is strong, but it could be Pisces and Scorpio are present too. Those two are also water elements. And the more a particular element is dominant, the more one is typical of that particular sign or element. The other 10, 15, 20% that may not be 100% accurate can be attributed to the hour that one is born, that may consist of another sign, other positions of other planets, the genes, the upbringing, and so forth. And that is why you can have twins who are born within a few minutes apart, and astrologers today have no clue as to why they may be so different, even though they're very similar in many ways. After all, they're in the same sign. There may be some genes that one acquired from one side of the family, the other one acquired from the other side of the family, and according to the Jewish tradition, certain traits are inherited, and traits are characteristics. They are characteristics that can be inherited as opposed to characteristics that are acquired through the hour or the month that one is born. The fire element was the one that we explained or described as more aggressive, forceful, assertive, impulsive, rash, full of energy and life. That's very brief, right? The earth element was one that was much more practical, down to earth, constant, serious, slower, cautious. Whether it's Virgo, Taurus, or Capricorn, they will share many of those earthy qualities. And the air element, of which Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius belong to, are more intellectual, more airy, more spacey too, more abstract, a little bit more aloof, more friendly, more social too, depending which one. The air elements are not as aggressive as the fire, but are not as down to earth as the earth. They're in a different realm. They're more air, more intellectual. They like to read. They like reason and logic. And the water element is much more into the feelings and the emotions, which we haven't covered until now, because that belongs strictly to the water element. And that's important because you will come across in your life with those who are extremely sensitive, sentimental, dependent, attached, shy. All of these qualities belong with water element. Now, just because you may be a fire sign and you may say, but I'm also a little bit shy, it's not a contradiction. Because it could be that there's something in that chart, in your Mazal, that is a bit of shyness. But you will not be the typical shy individual as the Pisces or as the Cancer is, as I will elaborate a little bit later on. So it's important to keep this in mind, because we all have a combination of the various elements in us, but there will always be one that is the strongest. Before we begin to talk about Cancer, just a quick introduction, as I like always to do, to cover some points that are related to Mazalot. After all, the purpose of this lecture is not just to teach astrology, and it's not just to share with you this very fascinating topic, but it's also more about midot, about how one can work on himself, how one can get to know his friend, his spouse a little bit better, how one can interact with his employee, with his boss, with his children who may belong to a particular sign. Rabbis tell us lefum tzara agra, a very important expression, a very important statement. Rabbis remind us that according to one's effort, depending on how much effort you apply, that is how you will be rewarded. You can have two individuals with a similar upbringing. One has to work a lot more on his anger management than the other, simply because that is his mazal. He was born with that inclination, and therefore, even though the two of them are learning about how dangerous anger is, one may not have that much trouble with it because he's a Taurus, and he only gets angry once in a while. Oy vey boy, if he gets angry, that's a different story. It's going to be hard to calm him down, but at least it just happens once in a while. Others may have more of a difficulty with anger because of their mazal, or whatever, or because they were born in Morocco, which also contributes, you know. Regardless of what the reasons are, they're going to have a bigger struggle, a greater challenge overcoming it. And guess what happens when the two come upstairs? Who's going to be rewarded more for controlling his anger? The one who had more anger. The greater the effort, the more the reward. Two individuals keeping Shabbat. One grew up in a home which was Reform, completely deprived of any Jewish values. And the other one grew up in Bnei Brak, Mea Shearim. Everything was almost automatic. He was spoon-fed Judaism. Who's going to be rewarded much more for observing Shabbat, for putting on tefillin? The one who had a harder time. He had to overcome peer pressure. He had to fight his parents, perhaps. He had to endure a lot of difficulties to fulfill a mitzvah. He will be rewarded a lot more. In the same way that one is rewarded according to his efforts in fulfilling a mitzvah, the same is true when one is working on a midah, whether it means to be generous and one is stingy by nature, or to overcome anger. Point number 2, God does not demand the impossible. En HaKadosh Baruch Hu ba bitrunya in biryotav, as the rabbis tell us. He will not demand of you something that you are not capable of doing. One who has been given a challenge is because he can take it. He can live with it. He can deal with it. He can control himself. There's no such thing that one is born with a certain weakness, a certain characteristics that he can't control, that he can't deal with. We can't change. You can't eliminate a particular characteristic because it's imprinted, it's embedded. You cannot remove it. It's there, but it can be controlled. One would not receive a challenge unless he can handle it. If he's successful or not depends on what? Not his mazal, but his free will. That's where free will is important. We have a mazal, which delineates more or less what our character will be, which is important because the character, the personality is part of the tools that we receive in this world, in this life, that we need to do something with them. That more or less delineates our mission. So we are given the tools to be able to do our mission. But we have to exercise good judgment, which involves using our free will properly. And if one does not have proper guidance, one does not go by the map that is recommended in the Torah, then obviously he may make many mistakes. Because secularism does not teach you necessarily how to deal with certain characteristics. Anger management, perhaps, they can give you some clues, some ideas, but they're not always going to be in agreement with what the Torah says. One goes to a marriage counselor, you should go to a Jewish marriage counselor that has the right perspective according to Jewish values. Number 4, the battle of the Yetzer is constant, and it's the most difficult battle of all. Every day when you wake up in the morning, Even if you are 85 years old, you still have a Yetzer Hara. You may have the Yetzer Hara that you've had when you were 20. You're just not strong enough, perhaps, to carry out your wishes, to fulfill your wishes, your desires, because you're 85. But you still have it in your mind. One is still doing battle with the Yetzer Hara on a regular basis, and one needs to be aware of this. Rabbis tell us, don't feel so confident of yourself just because you beat him yesterday. You conquered yourself, you controlled yourself, you were nice and generous. That may have been true yesterday. There's no guarantee that past performance will repeat itself in the future. So don't take credit for it. Be happy, of course, but be careful, because the Yetzer Hara is there at all times, and that is his job. He works overtime to defeat us, and part of our reward involves defeating him, winning the battle. He doesn't want us to succeed in our mission, and our mission is not just about being alive, breathing, getting married, and having children. One of the greatest challenges that human beings have is just being a good, decent human being. That's not easy. As I said before, some will have less of a difficulty with certain areas of interpersonal relationships. But everyone has something. Everyone has some weakness. Otherwise, he would be with the angels. None of us is an angel. And it would help if one recognizes what his weaknesses are, so he can, better early than later, begin to work on them. Because if one works on his weaknesses, his chances of success are greater. And last point is, he who helps himself will receive divine assistance. Even though it may be difficult, it is an uphill battle, but whoever really attempts, makes an effort, we have a tradition that the Almighty will help us. We will receive divine assistance from heaven. Hashem wants us to succeed. He will send us the right partner, our soulmate, to be able to do our job properly. After all, two heads are better than one. And if you marry the right person, and you have the right ideas about what marriage should be, and there's mutual respect, then obviously you're much stronger than if you would remain single. And hopefully, if the two are going to do the right things, then they're going to have a third partner as well. That is Hashem. The Shekhinah will reside in their home. And that is what we wish every Hatan v'Kala, sheivnu bayit ne'eman b'Yisrael, that they should build a home that is founded on Jewish values, where there's respect and trust, and more important than anything else, everything that they do is in accordance with the Torah, according to God's wishes. So if one really wants to succeed in life and asks for help, Hashem will say, I'm there for you, but begin to help yourself first. Show that you are sincere, and then, of course, I will help you as well. Cancer is a very interesting sign. He's, as I said before, the first one that belongs to the water element. And water is a very, very interesting element, because all of us will somewhat identify with the beauty that water is. But remember, just because we like what we hear, not everyone has doses of it. And when you don't have doses of water, you can be very, very cold. An individual can be extremely cold, uninterested, indifferent, not generous, everything that is the opposite of what the water element represents. So it's important to have a little bit of everything. But tonight we're going to be talking about one who has extra abundance, or lots of, this particular water element. Just a quick description of what Cancer is. He's emotional. So is Pisces and Scorpio. They're all water. What is emotional? They're very loving, they're very caring, they have a lot of imagination, they can be very intuitive. And they're more cautious, protective, sympathetic. That is all on the positive side. On the negative side, what the water can do to an individual is make him moody, very moody sometimes, changeable, over-emotional, touchy, clinging, dependent, unable to let go. These are some of the characteristics, or a brief description of Cancer. Now we're going to get a little bit more deeply involved into the actual personality of Cancer. on a day-to-day basis as a human being, as a parent, as a husband, as a child. So it's very interesting. Let's begin with his moods. He's a water element, so he has periodic moods. Now, the reason why he has periodic moods is because Cancer is ruled by the moon. And astrologers like to describe his moods like the waning of the moon. You know, it decreases, it increases. The moods change almost every day, or at least once a week. And these moods are very noticeable. When they're in a good mood, they can be very funny. If you hear somebody laughing, as long as it's not too loud, because if it's too loud, it could be a Leo. But if you hear somebody laughing or always with a giggle, it's a Cancer in a good mood. He can be the funniest in the room. He can make everybody laugh. Now, this is not the laughter or the humor of a Gemini. This is a much more sincere laughter, a giggle, a laughter that comes from a certain sensitivity to human nature. Otherwise, he's usually quiet and gentle. Cancer people are usually quiet and gentle. Their funny side stems from sensitivity. They're not looking for publicity like Leo. They're not clowns like Sagittarius. They're simply sensitive. They may want to be noticed too. As we will see later, Cancer is one of the signs that craves or needs attention. And that somehow may be related to that laughter in public, even though, as we will see later, they're a little bit on the shy side, but they have a certain light side to them, which makes them laugh and giggle, which is good. You will see later on why this is very good, that they have this to them. I'll give you a clue. They're very moody. And what does moody lead to? To depression. So it's a very positive thing that they also have this light side to them, that they can laugh. Secretly, they need and enjoy attention. They may hide from certain things, but not from appreciation. They need it. They need to be appreciated. Everybody likes compliments, but Cancer and Pisces too need lots of it. At times they get into a melancholic mood and depression. So does Scorpio, so does Pisces, right? But it is more noticeable on Cancer. Why do they go into a depression? We have to understand this. We have to take this one step further. What's the big deal? Why do people become depressed? Are they not confident in themselves? Not Cancer. Cancer can be very confident of himself. When is he not confident of himself? When he has certain fears. The problem with Cancer is that many of his fears are imaginative. They're not real. He's really fearful about certain things. They have fears, and these fears keep nagging at them. And they need to overcome those fears. If he cries, they're not crocodile tears. They're really coming from the heart. It's a heart that is very vulnerable, very sensitive, easily hurt. So they're going to need some assurances in order to calm down and not be depressed. His feelings are easily hurt by someone's rough tone of voice or by a harsh glance. Somebody looks at them not the right way or speaks to them roughly. They're already insulted. It hurts them very much. Now, some people might have a thicker skin and it may not hurt them as much, but some of them are very sensitive. And even something slight of a perceived insult or harshness, it very much hurts them. Now, what happens when a Cancer is hurt, really hurt? He disappears. He goes into hiding. Some of them may retaliate secretly, not as much as Scorpio, but most of the time they will just hide and not get even. If you hurt him, you will not be able to reach him easily. He will not answer the phone, go to the door, or look at his mail. You know what a Cancer is? A Cancer is a crab. Have you ever seen a crab? It's not kosher, by the way. A crab has a hard shell, but inside it's very soft. The core is very soft. So he will go hide in his shell, and you won't be able to reach him. In the midst of sadness or despair, they seek retreat and solitude. you have to understand him or her. If that's what they're doing, they just don't want to be seen or heard, it's because they're very, very sad, they're in despair, they just want to be alone by themselves. Now, this is not the Taurus who always likes to be by himself, doesn't need too many people around him, just he likes it and is comfortable with a quiet, peaceful home. This is a Cancer who likes to be around people. He enjoys people, no problem. But if he ever gets very depressed or hurt, he will run away and hide and just want to be by himself and not be bothered. Of all the 12 signs, they can be the most cranky ones. You know what a cranky person is? To complain, to have a problem with everything, and they can snap at you. And you might take it the wrong way. Well, what's that? What did I do to him? He's not upset at you. He's not angry with you. He's just disappointed with life. Something is wrong in his life, so he's snapping at you. And some people misunderstand that. They really think that he's upset. He's not upset at you. But because he's moody, because something went wrong that made him, for that moment, insecure for some reason, he will snap, he will be cranky. Their various moods are easily seen on their face since they have very expressive features. Some signs, like Capricorn, Taurus, can easily hide their feelings. You can't always tell what they're thinking, what they're feeling, unless you know them very well. Whoever knows a Taurus very well just knows not only what they're feeling, but what they're thinking. But you really have to be on the same wavelength to be able to know what's going on in their minds. Most people do not know what's going on in somebody else's mind. With Cancer, it's easy. His features are so expressive on his face that you see everything. When he gets over it, he becomes sweet and gentle and understanding once again. You see how everything depends on moods. And that is one of the problems. It's not a problem in the sense that's his nature. It just goes with the moods. He is stable. He's not an unstable person. Don't consider a moody person unstable. He's actually very stable, perhaps predictable, not as much as Taurus or Capricorn, but moods. And moods is what you are feeling, not necessarily what you're planning, what you want to accomplish. Moods is the emotions, the feelings, which change like the tide. You know, the moon influences the tide, goes up and down. So Cancer is governed by moods. But when he's in a good mood, he's very gentle, very nice, very understanding. You couldn't tell that there was anything wrong. Very sweet individual. They have great imagination and a retentive memory. They have one of the best memories. Now, Aquarius can also have an excellent memory. Geminis also can have a good memory, but a different memory for different things. One has a good memory for numbers. A Cancer has a good memory for everything, but especially for feelings. He remembers everything. They don't forget lessons that were learned 40 years ago. They will remember them, they will teach them, they will practice what they preach, of course. They learn from their experiences. They don't want to repeat a mistake. These memories are engraved in their heart like a photograph. You can easily detect their moods since they have very expressive features, as I said before. They reflect their feelings, whether it's joy, horror, sorrow, compassion, or ecstasy. You can see it on their face. One of the good things about Cancer is that they can keep secrets very well. They just hold everything. They don't always share what they have. So they're very good for keeping secrets. People tend to confide in them because of that. The air signs or the fire signs will lose control. They may promise and not deliver. They can't hold on to a word. So you don't want to confide necessarily in them. In a water sign, especially in a Cancer, you can confide. They won't reveal your secrets just to anyone. Because of their sensitive emotion, they know what it is in other people's minds. This is also very interesting. I said before, most people do not know what is in the other person's mind, but Cancer is very intuitive. So is Pisces, but Cancer even much more in some ways. They are able to sense what's on the other person's mind. It's called intuition. They have compassion, are highly intuitive. He may soak up all your thoughts, but you will not guess his private thoughts. He won't want to share what's on his mind because he's not necessarily trusting of just anyone, but he will be able to absorb and understand you and know you. Typically, he doesn't discuss his private life, but he will be delighted to hear about yours. They can be patient, and they do show empathy, so he will not have a problem with listening to somebody's problems. But to share his private life, not necessarily. They love their homes. There is no place like home is their motto. They prefer their home. They don't like to go out as much as some of the other signs, especially fire signs. Their home is, even though they may be traveling, they're always glad to be back home. The home is their castle. They will not easily give up anything they treasure. Even a pair of slippers from 30 years ago, it's already half worn. They'll keep it. They hold on to things just like the crab. You know, they grab it, they can't let go of it. They can't throw it away. They hold on to things very tenaciously and will not give it up without a struggle. So don't throw away his old hat, you know, that he still has, that he still likes. If he treasures it, just let him have it. He won't want to give it up. It's worthless, it's dirty, it's torn. He wants to hold on to it. He has a soft heart and is easily touched. Now that's very good to know. You know, don't take advantage of him. I'm just sharing with you the fact that this kind of an individual is very sentimental, and you could reach him through his heart because he truly cares and wants to help. Now there's this statement that he really wants to help has some strings attached. As you will see throughout the Mazalot, there's a lot of individuals, quite a few who are generous. There's not just one sign who's generous. There's quite a few who are generous, some more, some less. But there's different levels of generosity. Tzedakah, for example, charity. Unless you train yourself to give charity by nature, by instinct, a Leo, that we'll speak about B'ezras Hashem next week, may be generous because he very much believes that that's the right thing to do. You have more and he has less, then you give him. A Pisces may be generous because he's so compassionate, he can't stand seeing a poor Mexican woman carrying the baby behind her back, begging. So he will have pity on her. A Cancer can be generous. He's a water sign, right? So he's sentimental, he's sensitive, he's touched easily, cares. But you know what? He will not give unless nobody else moves in first. He's going to wait to see if somebody else will come in and help. If nobody comes in and helps, then he will go out and help. And he can be very generous. But he will not make the first move. He will always wait to see. Now you may say, well, he's stingy. No, he's not stingy. As I pointed out over here, he doesn't like to squander time and money if not necessary. And he calls that self-preservation, not selfishness. Why waste his money if somebody else is going to come up with it anyway? If somebody else is going to come out and help, why should he have to waste it? He's kind and generous if there's nobody else. But he will not necessarily be the first one to jump in and help. He's like a crab, soft at the core, but as hard, a hard conservative shell. Cancer, even though he's not an earth sign, he's a very strong sign. He's not fire, so he doesn't rush into anything. He's more calculative. He's more cautious. He's not cautious like the Taurus, who simply doesn't like to take risks. That's why a Taurus is cautious. A Taurus likes things the way they always were, doesn't like change. He's careful because he just doesn't want to take risks. He's not interested in gambling. A Cancer calculates a lot more. And his calculations and his decisions will be based on experience, whether it's his experience or somebody else's experience. Remember, he has fears and insecurities. He doesn't want to do things alone. He needs assurances. What kind of assurances? What will greatly help to assure a Cancer is somebody that has financial security as a foundation. He doesn't want to make a mistake. He's afraid of making mistakes. He's afraid of taking risks. He has certain fears and insecurities. So does Taurus. But Taurus, even without the fears, just that's the way he does things. He's not interested in making more money necessarily, even though he likes money. Cancer is much more ambitious in certain ways, but he has certain fears, and if he does not have a strong foundation, he will not jump into it. And oy vavoy, if a Cancer makes mistakes, remember this is a man or a woman who has certain fears and insecurities, and if they made a mistake, they will brood over that instead of shrugging them off. And that's also important to know, because of their moods and their sensitivity and their need for security. If they do make a mistake and they stumble, it's very, very hard on them. You know what it means to brood, to think about it, to be depressed, to not get over it easily. They can't just shrug it off. A fire sign will forget it within 2 seconds. An Aries makes mistakes all the time because he rushes, falls down, gets up. Rushes, falls down, gets up. It's incredible the way they're able to get up, go down, get up, go down. Right? He doesn't want to fall down. And if he does, he has a hard time overcoming it, getting over it. He never feels secure 100%, and because of that, no matter how much money they have in reserve they've saved, they will always feel they need more. Cancer is one of the signs that likes to save for a rainy day. Have you heard that expression? To save for a rainy day? Aries is not thinking like that. Aries is not into saving. Fire signs do not save. They want to have a good life right now. Tomorrow? Tomorrow. They don't need to think about tomorrow. Earth signs are always planning ahead. Capricorn, Taurus, Virgo somewhat is planning, or at least they're more conservative. Water is not only planning, he's saving a lot more than what he needs. He's very insecure. He wants to make sure he has enough for a rainy day. There may come a day where he doesn't have enough. And what's so funny about this is that they may imagine, many of them imagine of a future disaster. There's going to be one of these days, there's going to be Armageddon, Gog and Magog, and there won't be enough food. So if you look under their bed, you're going to find 24 cans of tuna fish that they bought 2 years ago on sale. Now, it could be tuna fish, it could be paprika, it could be breadcrumbs. And if it's not under the bed, go to the pantry of a Cancer and you will find tons of everything. You don't need so much. No, just in case this happens. Very, very typical. If somebody's a true Cancer, I assure you 100% that in their pantry or somewhere, under the bed, somewhere in the house, you will have a lot more food than what they really need. They're afraid. They need it. There may be a need for it. Jewelry? No, that depends on your preferences. But they're into food. You know, food brings security too. You have enough to eat. Their emotions can be very strong, and worry and apprehension will make them ill. People become sick for different reasons. And I didn't really touch upon weaknesses as far as the physical body of the various signs. Every sign has certain weaknesses. Some have more the heart, some the kidneys, some the liver. You know, that's quite normal. Cancer has a problem with his emotions. His feelings, his worries can make him very ill. When they become gloomy, they respond poorly to positive statements. And no other sign is as prone to let negative thoughts bring illness or to heal themselves. In other words, by them, their thoughts and their feelings make a big difference in how physically they are, how physically they feel. They can feel terrible if they have negative thoughts. And people trying to encourage them with positive statements, that doesn't usually do enough. If they're in one of those terrible moods, they can become sick from this. But they can also heal themselves, all with their mind. It all depends what they're thinking. If they're cheerful and happy, then they can heal themselves. If they're very moody and depressed, then they can really cause themselves a lot of problems. It's not, again. They need lots of doses of cheerfulness, optimism, and laughter to keep their mind and body healthy. This is what they need in order for them to be healthy, besides a nice amount of money in their bank account, which doesn't hurt. In order for them to be healthy, they need to be surrounded with cheerfulness, good music. All of this helps their mood and helps keep their mind and body healthy. I mentioned a little bit about their interest in money because it brings them security. You will find that many Cancers are very much in pursuit of money, very devoted to saving money. Money means a lot to them because it brings them security, and they will also spend frugally. They're not stingy, but they're very economical. They don't like wasting. And because they're very much in control of their money, they make excellent managers of funds. Don't give your money to an Aries. Don't give your money to, well, I'm not going to tell you all the signs, but there's certain signs that you don't want to entrust with your money because you may not see it. Simply, they're not as good in managing the money, in putting it away, in making the best investments. That's just a fact. What can we do? I mean, it's not because they're bad people. Everybody's good. They may be good, but they simply do not know the priorities. Some people's priority is, I want less interest. I want less interest. I'll be happy with 5.5% interest, but I want to make sure that that money is secure 100%. Some people are willing to invest money in bonds or in stocks, even though it's not 100% guaranteed, but because it may give you 18% interest a year. So if you gave this individual your money to invest and that bond went down, well, what are you going to do? What some people do who are smart, who manage funds properly, is that they diversify. They don't put all the eggs in one basket, just in case the stock goes down. So Cancers know how to do that. They don't want to lose. They don't want to take any chances. He will share and be generous with those who he loves and who are in real need. If there is somebody in real need, they will be generous. They will mother you and stuff you with food. You better finish it because they hate waste. So if they give you the food to eat, then you better finish it. They will be very protective and proud of their loved ones. And that's also very, very nice to know. But this last statement, very protective and proud, even though it sounds good, it's sometimes detrimental. Because what is protective? Protective can also be possessive. It means you can hold on to something. So even though it sounds good, and it is good, they're proud of their children. They're very proud of their loved ones. They protect them. But sometimes it's too good. It's too good. And too good is also not too good. So now we'll go over and see the differences between a Cancer man and a Cancer woman. Remember, a lot of what was said before applies to men, and some applies to women. Now I'm going to try to differentiate a little bit between the two, but you may still find things in the man that apply to the woman, things in the woman that apply to a man. There's a lot of common ground here, but I separated them because those of you who are still single and dating a Cancer, you should be aware of certain points. These are the highlights of the Cancer man. What was said before is more general. Even though we covered certain specifics, this is more geared towards the man. A Cancer man does not confide in strangers. Remember we said before, he has certain insecurities. And because he does not confide, it may take him a while to get to know him if you're dating him, because he won't reveal himself. The Cancer is sensitive. Yes, he's definitely sensitive. He's loyal. No problem with that. If that's what you're looking for, Cancer has that. Very, very much. Sensitive and loyal, and can be shy. Not all the times, but he can be shy. Can have crabby complaints and a gruff manner. All of a sudden you say, wait a minute, yesterday he was so shy and gentle and sensitive. Yeah, but he can be, remember the moods? So he can be crabby, complaining, gruff manner, but can also be warm and gentle, depending on what? On the mood. His caution will impress you, but his pessimism may depress you. Now, he's not a pessimist. There are some signs that are much more pessimistic than he is. But depending on his mood and his insecurities, he may be pessimistic, and he will cause you to be depressed. His expressions change according to his moods. So even though you saw him laughing yesterday, not only laughing, they're even capable of entertaining a whole group of people. Very, in a very nice way. All of a sudden, his expression changes because of his mood. Always guaranteed that if you see a Cancer, not happy, not cheerful, not gentle, but crabby, it's one of those moods. Even if he's rough, his heart is soft you can be assured he's affectionate and full of sentiment. So don't be misled by his roughness sometimes, or that he snaps. It's just a mood. He's very soft. Will pursue money with fervor. Now, what's wrong with that? The only problem with that is that that may rival you. You, his future potential partner, his business may be competing for attention with you. Now, his home is always first. Home is always first. But because he loves his work and he needs to make money, that, depending on, of course, on the job and the type of business, that may rival for attention with his partner. He's not stingy, but savings is more attractive to him than spending. This is one of the signs, and there are a few other, who are more into saving than they are into spending. Again, he's not stingy. Never think a Cancer is stingy, but he's not a big spender either. Many of them are attached to their mothers. Now, you know what that means, attached to the mother? A Cancer man will tell his wife, what do you mean? You used frozen pies and instant potatoes? My mother used to make real bread with real potatoes. The hard way, the real way. You see what I mean? He will compare a lot to his mother because many of them are attached to their mother. Now, because they're attached to the mother, they may cancel a date if their mother needs them. You will find this with a lot of Cancer men who are very close to their mothers. I mean, it's very nice for every boy and every son to be close to their mother, but Cancer, especially if he had a very good relationship with the mother when he was a youngster. If not, if they don't have a good relationship with their parents when they're young, then they become very bitter when they grow up. We're talking about one who was given a good upbringing. His parents were warm and caring to him, so that attachment is reciprocated later on in a very, very strong way. And you're wondering, wait a minute, me first or your mother first? No, mother. You know, they're very close to their mother. That's very nice, but sometimes you have to really be careful that that does not take away from the time that you need to spend with your wife. Torah says, "V'azav et aviv et imo v'tabak mishto." You have to remember the priority number one is your home. You have to build your home. Parents, as much as we need to respect them to the very last day of their lives, the husband and wife come first. And that is a problem with in some communities where parents get involved and they can destroy an otherwise potentially good relationship. The home comes first. So it's very nice that he's being very attached to the mother, but you have to be careful. Maybe a very good chef himself. There are many Cancer men who are chefs. They love the kitchen. You know which Cancers are these? They're the plump ones, the heavy ones. There's two kinds of Cancers, the real skinny ones and the heavy ones. You will see two kinds. I think the majority of them are more on the skinny side, but the ones who are plumpy, a lot of them like the kitchen. They make good chefs. They're loaded with artistic talent, which they can use in other things too. They have high standards, which not every woman can meet. The reason why they have high standards is because they're afraid of getting burned. They just don't want any woman. Remember, they're afraid of making mistakes. Marriage? Oy vavoy to make a mistake in marriage. So they have high standards in what they're looking for. He's not a sloppy dresser, and he has good taste for fine things. You may wonder, is there somebody who is a sloppy dresser? Yeah, we'll talk about him some other time. There are some who don't care so much about their outside appearance. Cancer is not sloppy. They have a good taste. Likes to work and aims to get to the top. They don't always want to be working for somebody. They want to be independent. And he will rarely be seen on the unemployment line because they like to work. They're not lazy in that respect. As parents, they're very fine parents, caring, gentle, sympathetic, understanding, and protective of their children. They have all the good qualities of being a parent. What's the problem as a parent? It's hard for them to give up control. Very hard to give up control. They want to be in control of the situation. Again, it has to do with fears and insecurities. Hard for them to give up control. So the only way to get around that is to use sweet caresses and soft words to win them over. That's the way to win over a Cancer. He's sentimental, he's sensitive, and he's obviously caring, but he has these insecurities, and you have to get around that by being very, very soft and sweet. Cancer woman. She wants a man who will give her financial security. Now, so does Taurus. Taurus very much wants security. But for a Cancer, that security is much more emphasized than a Taurus. Because a Taurus woman is a very strong woman. A Cancer woman, even though she has certain strengths, she's going to be relying a lot on her husband. And she's therefore going to want somebody that will be secured. She wants to have a secured investment. She can be shy, sweet, and modest. That definitely describes a Cancer woman. Very modest. They're not showy. Hates to be criticized, however, or hurt or ridiculed. They have a problem with it. They take everything very, very to heart. They're sensitive, and they cannot stand being rejected. May be afraid if she isn't pretty enough or smart enough or not loved enough. This is very typical of Cancer for a Cancer woman. Her husband, therefore, has to reassure her. No, you look great, you are smart, I really care for you very, very much. They need these reassurances. I mean, every woman likes to hear that, but Cancer needs to hear that more than others. They need reassurance that their husband or their wife or whatever really, really cares for them, that they really look okay. It's important to them because of that insecure feeling. Their moods may fluctuate, as I said about the man. Same is true about the woman. But she has a good sense of humor. She will giggle a lot. Very good in the kitchen. Now, very good in the kitchen does not mean that she likes to do the sponja, sweep the floors. She does not necessarily like to be a housewife in every respect. The kitchen, yes. The baking and the cooking, yes. But not dusting. No, that is already a whole different... leave that to someone else. Or bring a maid. But the kitchen, yes. That's her favorite room. Can be very touchy and cry a lot. There are some signs that cry a lot. One of them is Cancer. Now, crying doesn't mean like a baby crybaby, but, tears. They need constant reassurances. Now, slightest unintentional remark can hurt her sensitive feelings. So you have to sometimes walk carefully that you don't step on her because she's sensitive. Now, of course, after many, many years, hopefully husband and wife know each other, then they're forgiving. But some never learn. Some are always touchy and sensitive. And you have to be extra careful with them. What can you do? I'll give you an example of a typical Cancer reaction. Her husband says, "You know what? I like your hair. You look gorgeous." "Oh, I know why you said that. Because yesterday I looked awful, right?" Whoever said that? Whoever said that? Why make that connection? But that would be very typical of a Cancer's touchiness. You mean you're saying now I look good? That means yesterday it was awful. It didn't look good. Whoever said that? Ma pitom. But that's the connection that they may make. So you have to be careful. What can you do? That is the kind of sensitivity that certain signs have. Very attached to the man she loves. So if you're a Scorpio and you want somebody that will be very, very attached, which is important to a Scorpio too, this is a sign. That is why Scorpio gets along very much with Cancer. One of the best combinations for Scorpio is a Cancer. She's very attached, and that's exactly what he wants. That's important to him. Attached, devoted, very much attached, very much attached. She'll hold on to him. Will not let you down in times of hardship. Capable of sacrifice for those she loves. Oh, a Scorpio loves that because he's also capable of sacrifice and can be very brave for others. If they can become, how do you say it in English, heroine? Not heroin, no, not the one you smoke. The female type of hero. Heroin, right? So that's similar to heroin. No, but that's similar to the drug heroin. It sounds the same, right? Yeah, but I didn't mean that one. I meant heroic, right? They can, because they hold on, and they feel very strongly, right? And they care. Well, if you care and you feel very strongly, you're possessive and protective. Those are the ingredients for being brave and willing to sacrifice. Not everyone is capable of sacrifice. Cancer is very much capable of sacrifice. May want to be spoiled a bit. Yeah, this is one of the signs that likes to be spoiled, pampered. If things don't go her way, she can be patient. But if depressed, she will need your help. Remember we said before, if a Cancer gets into that depressive mood, it's hard for them to come out of it. And they need the right man to help. Of all the 12 signs, they make one of the best mothers. I wrote great mothers. They're very, very motherly, sensitive, protective with children, but may hang on to them too much. As we said before, they're very controlling, so they may hang on to them. A Cancer woman can turn to her teenage son who's 24 years old. That woman you're dating, she's not good enough for you. She's not good enough for you. She's not good enough. That would be a Cancer mother. Typical Cancer mother who nothing is good enough for her son that she's proud of. Protected, is that good? No, it's not too good. Because give him a little bit of freedom. Don't hang on to him too much. She's a tower of strength and refuge. And what does that mean? A child who was raised by a Cancer mother will always remember his mother. He will compare his wife to his mother. He will always be able to go to his mother. She will always greet him with chocolate chip cookies ready. They're very good mothers. As long as they don't have any problem, as long as they're healthy and not in a bad mood, tower of strength and refuge. And just like they're proud of their children, the children are proud of them too. Okay, a little bit of advice for Cancer children. As they're growing up, what should you be aware of? What will you notice? They're emotional. As we said before about the men and the women. Emotional, you know what goes with emotions. They're shy in expressing their inner desires. You have to get it out of them. They're not going to be so expressive as to what is bothering them. Needs attention and approval. Rejection crushes him. Now this one is very interesting. Needs attention and approval. What does approval mean? Let me tell you a quick story about a Cancer woman. There was a Cancer woman as a child who used to get about 10 cents a week from her parents as an allowance. This goes back years ago. 10 cents was money. What is it, about 50 years ago? As a child, how much does a child need for the weekly allowance to buy candies and whatever? And she did not use it. She saved it until she had 50 cents. What did she do with the 50 cents? She would give it as a prize to whoever was nicest to her. She used that money instead of spending it on herself. Whoever was the nicest to her in the past month, she would give them the 50 cents as a prize. Very much Cancer. Why? Approval. They very much needed that. Made a difference to them. Rejection crushes him. Usually easy to manage and discipline. They're not, unless they're crabby, but they're usually not a problem. They're not harsh. They're not, difficult. Maybe spoiled if he gets his way, but if he's ignored, he will cry. So what are you supposed to do? He has this problem. He's going to be spoiled. He's the one that's going to be spoiled if he gets his way. Not every sign. He will be spoiled if he gets his way. But if he doesn't get his way, he's going to cry a lot. What do? The rabbis tell us very simple. Whenever you have this kind of a situation, you have to take the middle road. Small docha v'yimin mekarevet. You spank him, but then you hug him. Not simultaneously. You wait, of course, a few minutes. He may need a spank. Yes. Because you don't want to spoil him. But you don't want him to cry. You want him to remember you as affectionate, so go ahead and hug him and kiss him a few minutes later. Don't confuse him, so don't do it right away. Wait a few minutes and reassure him later that he can't get his way all the time. Rabbis tell us, small docha, with your left, push him off, but with your right, embrace him. The left is a softer hand, the weaker hand. Use that hand to push aside, to refuse. When you have to, use your left hand to refuse. But if you did refuse, just remember to use your right hand to embrace. You've got to use both. That is the middle road. You need sometimes both. Especially with him, that he may become very, very pampered. Maybe afraid of sleeping in the dark. Maybe afraid of noises. Remember, he has fears. You may have to go over to him and reassure him. Calm his fears, laugh with him, and show empathy. Convince him or her that you're smart, you're pretty, you're loved. As we said before, they need these assurances. Sometimes even when they're adults. Advice for a Cancer boss, they take their work seriously. He wants hard-working employees. He will not tolerate those who want to goof off. Everybody understand what to goof off means? To take it easy, not to do any work, to drink a cup of coffee every 15 minutes, to just not do work. That's called goofing off. They won't take that. Their business is very important to them. They want to succeed, and they want good workers. They're not greedy. Will be very generous in time of need if an employee needs it. They have insight into your feelings and their understanding. They actually read your feelings. They're not indifferent. They're not focused just on their money and their job. They actually, because they have feelings, they actually can read your feelings. As we said before, they absorb everything. They're understanding. And if you are sincere and honest, they will back you. They will give you a raise. They're very supportive. They're generous. I mean, they're pretty much, they're good people. As long as you're a good employee, you're a hard-working employee, they will remember that. Just quickly go over to the midot, as we did every week. Does Cancer have a problem with gava, with arrogance? I don't think so. Anava, humbleness, does he have to work on humbleness? Not that much. Doesn't really need to work because they're shy, they're understanding. Busha, they need to work on their shyness, but in a positive way. In other words, not to be too shy. They don't have a lack of busha. Azut, are they aggressive? No. Not like the fire signs. Ahava, they're pretty good with love. They're loving, they're caring. Sinah, they don't really hate anybody. The Hamim is compassion and empathy, they're pretty good. They have a large amount of doses of that. Akhzariyut, they're not the cruel type. Simha, they can use sometimes. They need to be cheerful and happy when they're in a bad mood. They have to work on being happy all the time. De'aga, yes, they have certain insecurities and fears. De'aga means worry. They have to work on that. How do you work on that? You develop midat bitachon. Your confidence in the Almighty, that everything is for the good, everything will be fine. Harata, regretting. Harata is sometimes a problem because they remember everything. And they don't easily regret, they don't easily forget. Kas, anger, not so much. They're not the angry type. Ratzon means to appease and to be forgiving. Usually okay, but it may take them a while. Because they're in a bad mood, they'll lock themselves, they'll hide. It'll be hard to come to appease them and calm them down. Kina, they can be jealous. We didn't speak too much about this, but they can be jealous because they want to. The reason for that is because they want approval. Or because of their insecurities, they can have jealousy. Zerizut, usually they're not lazy, they're pretty diligent. Zeirut, they are cautious, so that's fine. Aslut, they're not always lazy. Nedivut, they're generous, so that's okay. Tzaikanut, stingy? Not really. Zechira, yes, they remember everything, even all the insults, so that could be a problem. But on the other hand, the good memory means that they will pay on time, they will remember their debts. Some people just forget their debts, intentionally or unintentionally. What difference does it make? They're not responsible. I think some of you know people like that, right? They just forget about their debts. Right? They don't care about they're not responsible. They will remember, they'll pay the rent on time. Shichecha, to forget, they don't forget so easily. Shetikas, to be silent, to be quiet, they can be very quiet, too quiet sometimes. Sheker, they don't really lie, but they have an imagination, however, and that imagination sometimes could embellish things, but not so much like the Gemini. Remember, the Gemini has a lot of ease with words. The Cancer is not interested in fooling, in cheating, so he won't use sheker, lying, to his advantage. Emet, they are pretty much truthful. They're sincere. Emet goes with sincerity. Sincerity. Hanifut, to flatter, they're not into flattering because they don't use the words, to flatter, but they can use compliments. Compliments is not hanifut. It's not flattery. Lashon hara, will they gossip and slander someone? No, they're not into that much. They're very private. Teshuvah, how about teshuvah? Teshuvah means to repent, to correct your mistakes, to start again. It will be difficult for them because if something was done wrong to them, they may not be so forgiving. But if they did something wrong, they may want to correct it, but they will need help with that. Torah, to learn, to study, requires constancy and determination. They have that. They can be constant and determined as long as they're in a good mood. Yirat Shamayim, to fear God, to develop respect for others, for those higher in authority, for rabbis. That's all Yirat Shamayim. They don't have a problem with that. Sabranut is patience. They're pretty good with that. They're tolerant and patient. Ta'avot, desires. They can have certain desires. You know which one they have? Money and food. So Sartan does have a weakness with ta'avot, with certain ta'avot, which Gemini didn't have so much, but they may have. They may love money and they may love food. Kavod, do they seek honor? No, they seek approval. That's different than honor. They're not the big shots. Nekama, they are not so revengeful except once in a while when they're very upset. Dikaon, yes. Dikaon, tons of it. There's a few signs in the zodiac that have a problem with dikaon, depression. They're moody, they're sentimental, they have feelings, they're touchy, and they can have a problem with depression, so then that's something that they need to work on. Letzanut, well, Letzanut, they can giggle and laugh a lot, but they're not the clowns. They're not the ones who are not serious. They're not superficial like the Gemini. They're much more serious, more ambition, and therefore they will not mock and ridicule everyone because they don't want to be mocked and ridiculed. So they because of their sensitivity, they will not be clowns, but they will be cheerful and they will be happy if they're in a good mood. A lot depends on their mood. So far, what have we seen with Cancer? A lot of strength, but some weaknesses in the exact same way that every one of the signs. No one has all the strengths. No one, Baruch Hashem, has all the weaknesses. And what's interesting about all of this is that hopefully you will be getting to see, as we cover all the mazalot, that because of the characteristics that everyone is endowed with, that is what makes it easy for him or her to get along with certain people. That is why some people are attracted to some and not attracted to others. But it does not mean you can't get along and respect and tolerate everyone for what they are, as long as you appreciate the good that he or she has, and as long as you are understanding of the faults that he or she has. So it takes using a little bit of the head and not reacting to every slight and not being overly sensitive and not taking things too personally. I mean, obviously, if somebody did something terrible to you and double-crossed you and something like that, that's different. But many of the times, perhaps the majority of the times, people don't really do things intentionally to hurt you. It's just a lack of communication. People are very, very different. And it's not always easy to get along with people who are very, very different. But that is part of life, that we are around people who are different than us. And hopefully, if we learn the right lessons, B'ezrat Hashem, we will be able to get along with everyone. Thank you very much. Any questions? Otherwise, B'ezrat Hashem, next week we'll talk about Leo. What? Not his Mazal, but his free will. That's where free will is important. We have a Mazal, which delineates more or less what our character will be, which is important because the character, the personality is part of the tools that we receive in this world, in this life, that we need to do something with them. That more or less delineates our mission. So we are given the tools to be able to do our mission. But we have to exercise good judgment, which involves using our free will properly. And if one does not have proper guidance, one does not go by the map that is recommended in the Torah, then obviously he may make many mistakes. Because secularism does not teach you necessarily how to deal with certain characteristics. Anger management, perhaps, they can give you some clues, some ideas, but they're not always going to be in agreement with what the Torah says. One goes to a marriage counselor, you should go to a Jewish marriage counselor. that has the right perspective according to Jewish values. Number 4, the battle of the Yetzer is constant, and it's the most difficult battle of all. Every day when you wake up in the morning, even if you are 85 years old, you still have a Yetzer Hara. You may have the Yetzer Hara that you've had when you were 20. You're just not strong enough, perhaps, to carry out your wishes, to fulfill your wishes, your desires, because you're 85. But you still have it in your mind. One is still doing battle with the Yetzer Hara on a regular basis, and one needs to be aware of this. Rabbis tell us, don't feel so confident of yourself just because you beat him yesterday. You conquered yourself, you controlled yourself, you were nice and generous. That may have been true yesterday. There's no guarantee that past performance will repeat itself in the future. So don't take credit for it. Be happy, of course, but be careful, because the Yetzer Hara is there at all times, and that is his job. He works overtime to defeat us. And part of our reward, because you will come across in your life with those who are extremely sensitive, sentimental, dependent, attached, shy. All of these qualities belong with water element. Now, just because you may be a fire sign and you may say, but I'm also a little bit shy, it's not a contradiction. Because it could be that there's something in that chart, in your Mazal, that is a bit of shyness. But you will not be the typical shy individual as the Pisces or as the Cancer is, as I will elaborate a little bit later on. So it's important to keep this in mind, because we all have a combination of the various elements in us, but there will always be one that is the strongest. Before we begin to talk about Cancer, just a quick introduction, as I'd like always to do, to cover some points that are related to Mazalot. After all, the purpose of this lecture is not just to teach astrology, and it's not just to share with you this very fascinating topic, but it's also more about midot, about how one can work on himself, how one can get to know his friend, his spouse a little bit better, how one can interact with his employee, with his boss, with his children who may belong to a particular sign. Rabbis tell us lefum tzara agra, a very important expression, a very important statement. Rabbis remind us that according to one's effort, depending on how much effort you apply, that is how you will be rewarded. You can have two individuals with a similar upbringing. One has to work a lot more on his anger management than the other, simply because that is his mazal. He was born with that inclination, and therefore, even though the two of them are learning about how dangerous anger is, one may not have that much trouble with it because he's a Taurus, and he only gets angry once in a while. Oy vay boy, if he gets angry, that's a different story. It's going to be hard to calm him down, but at least it just happens once in a while. Others may have more of a difficulty with anger because of their mazal, or whatever, or because they were born in Morocco, which also contributes, you know. Regardless of what the reasons are, they're going to have a bigger struggle, a greater challenge overcoming it. And guess what happens when the two come upstairs? Who's going to be rewarded more for controlling his anger? The one who had more anger. The greater the effort, the more the reward. Two individuals keeping Shabbat. One grew up in a home which was Reform, completely deprived of any Jewish values. And the other one grew up in Bnei Brak, Me'as Sharim. Everything was almost automatic. He was spoon-fed Judaism. Who's going to be rewarded much more for observing Shabbat, for putting on tefillin? The one who had a harder time. He had to overcome peer pressure. He had to fight his parents, perhaps. He had to endure a lot of difficulties to fulfill a mitzvah. He will be rewarded a lot more. In the same way that one is rewarded according to his efforts in fulfilling a mitzvah, the same is true when one is working on a midah, whether it means to be generous and one is stingy by nature, or to overcome anger. Point number 2, God does not demand the impossible. In Kadosh Baruch Hu ba bitrunya in biryotav, as the rabbis tell us, He will not demand of you something that you are not capable of doing. One who has been given a challenge is because he can take it. He can live with it. He can deal with it. He can control himself. There's no such thing that one is born with a certain weakness, a certain characteristics that he can't control, that he can't deal with. We can't change. You can't eliminate a particular characteristic because it's imprinted, it's embedded. You cannot remove it. It's there, but it can be controlled. One would not receive a challenge unless he can handle it. If he's successful or not depends on what. We're holding today the sign called Cancer, Sartan in Hebrew. For those of you who have been following from the very beginning, the very first lecture on astrology consisted of the various elements. Elements meaning earth, water, air, and fire. Every individual, every human being consists of all four, but there's always a dominant element. And there are 3 signs in every one of those elements, right? We have 12 signs, 3 signs per element. And we've covered till now an example of the fire with Aries. We've covered an example of earth with Taurus. And we've covered an example with air with Gemini. Tonight we're going to cover an example of water, the water element, and the first one is Cancer. But before we begin with Cancer, just want to cover a little bit, perhaps do a little overview of what all of this means. For those of you who were not here before, it's important to remember that the month is not the only factor that contributes to molding one's individuality and personality. The hour is also important. And a lot of what you will hear tonight concerning Cancer, whether it's about yourself or somebody that you know, may not match up 100%. But I assure you that it most likely will match up between 75 to 85%. The vast majority of what I will describe defines the typical Cancer, meaning that the water element is the most dominant in his chart, meaning not only Cancer is strong, but it could be Pisces and Scorpio are present too. Those two are also water elements. And the more a particular element is dominant, the more one is typical of that particular sign or element. The other 10, 15, 20% that may not be 100% accurate can be attributed to the hour that one is born, that may consist of another sign, other positions of other planets, the genes, the upbringing, and so forth. And that is why you can have twins who are born within a few minutes apart, and astrologers today have no clue as to why they may be so different, even though they're very similar in many ways. After all, they're in the same sign. There may be some genes that one acquired from one side of the family, the other one acquired from the other side of the family, and according to the Jewish tradition, certain traits are inherited, and traits are characteristics. They are characteristics that can be inherited as opposed to characteristics that are acquired through the hour or the month that one is born. The fire element was the one that we explained or described as more aggressive, forceful, assertive, impulsive, rash, full of energy and life. That's very brief, right? The earth element was one that was much more practical, down to earth, constant, serious, slower, cautious. Whether it's Virgo, Taurus, or Capricorn, they will share many of those earthy qualities. And the air element, of which Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius belong to, are more intellectual, more airy, more spacey too, more abstract, a little bit more aloof, more friendly, more social too, depending which one. The air elements are not as aggressive as the fire, but are not as down to earth as the earth. They're in a different realm. They're more air, more intellectual. They like to read. They like reason and logic. And the water element is much more into the feelings and the emotions, which we haven't covered until now, because that belongs strictly to the water element. And that's important